Hey everybody! Today we're going to be doing an alcohol wash on Carte Mixed Media, and then I'm going to be sharing some tips on how to paint clouds. So if you want to know how the new Carte Mixed Media holds up to an alcohol wash underpainting, I guess you'll just have to hang around and find out. For this demo, I'm using 70% isopropyl alcohol. In my review of this paper, I did a wash with 91% isopropyl alcohol, and while it worked fine, I'm just afraid it might be a little too harsh for the paper, and quite frankly, unnecessary. Even water would be fine to create a wash, but because alcohol dries more quickly, it won't cause the paper to buckle. After I sketch in the largest shapes that make up the composition, the first thing I do is use soft pastel to block in general value and color of those larger shapes. You don't need to overdo it with pastel pigment. As long as you have a light layer covering the surface, you have enough pigment to go in with alcohol wash. And as you can see, I'm not worried about detail whatsoever in this initial block-in stage. I'm just getting pigment down on the paper. So please don't worry about starting off messy. In fact, I encourage it. When I'm painting the alcohol wash, I'm trying to stay in the general vicinity of the shapes, but I'm not too bothered if the colors bleed into one another, if the shapes start to overlap, because all this will do is give me a more painterly effect in the end, and I can refine the shapes afterwards if I want to. One important thing to note is that there are no pure white colors of Carte, and alcohol washes usually perform best on white paper. The alcohol wash turns the pastel pigment into a translucent, water-like consistency, so working on a toned surface will naturally produce a darker result with alcohol washes. I would advise against using a super dark paper and stick to a more medium to light value piece of Carte. The most important reason for using an alcohol wash is to cover the paper with color so we have a starting point to work off of, without compromising how much tooth we have to work with. When I say tooth, I mean the texture of the paper. If you think of paper as a mountain range, just a series of mountains and valleys, those valleys start to get filled up with pigment. So what an alcohol wash does is it dilutes that pigment and it carries it evenly throughout all of the valleys of the texture of the paper, and it creates more space in the valley, allowing more pastel to be layered over top. I'd like to make a quick side note that I'm using a bristle brush, but I honestly think a watercolor brush would have been more suitable, just because the texture of Carte isn't really that rough compared to sanded papers. I've got to say that this new Carte Mixed Media handles alcohol washes beautifully. I've mostly disregarded different types of wet underpaintings in the past, as Carte is my absolute favorite paper, but this new Carte Mixed Media allows for so much more experimentation and possibilities and has me really excited. And I'd also like to note that Sennelier is in no way affiliated or is sponsoring this video. I just genuinely love the paper. Before getting into tips on painting clouds with soft pastels, I'd like to note that this whole demo is available on my Patreon in 2 one-hour-long sessions. Part 1 is completely free and available to watch if you'd like to hear me explain what I'm doing in real time and all of the decisions that I make along the way. Link is in the description. My first tip for painting clouds is to consider the composition. When clouds are your focal point, it's likely because something about them truly captivated you, and you'll want that to come through in your painting. To emphasize them, let the clouds dominate the canvas by placing your horizon line lower on the page. This immediately tells the viewer what the painting is about and draws their eye to the sky. And you can see in this painting already, it's undeniable that the painting is about the clouds. I was in Florida and I was up at like 5:30 a.m. I had to work one of the days I was there. And I stepped out on the balcony and saw the clouds just like glowing from within. And because the sun is rising, the sun hits the tops of the clouds before it hits the ground, like where I'm at in the water. So as you can see, the lower clouds and the ground are all in shadow, but the top of the clouds are just absolutely glowing with diffuse light. And the goal of this painting is me trying to capture that effect. Establishing the light source is essential when painting clouds because it brings clarity, form, and atmosphere to your scene. Light defines the structure of a cloud, where it catches the glow of the sun, where it falls into shadow, and how it interacts with the surrounding sky. Without a clear light source, clouds can appear flat or ambiguous, but with it, they gain volume, depth, and a sense of harmony within the landscape. It anchors your painting in a specific time of day and mood, guiding the viewer's eye and enhancing the overall believability of the scene. In this painting specifically, I'm really trying to capture the form and the mass of the clouds and give them a voluminous appearance. I'm really fascinated by Southwestern painters and how they capture mass. They really create a sense of volume within the mass, and I'm trying to incorporate those concepts in this painting. If you've ever painted a white ball with a direct light source, this is really no different. It's truly all about the basics. My third tip is to keep in mind that the edges of clouds are soft. While clouds have form and volume, they're not solid. They're made of vapor, constantly shifting and diffusing. To capture their ethereal quality, soften the edges with gentle gradients or subtle shifts in value. This will help convey their lightness and atmospheric nature. Much like with soft edges, understanding value is key. And when it comes to clouds, the value range is often more subtle than we initially perceive. Our eyes naturally adjust to the light in the sky, causing the shadows to appear darker and the highlights brighter than they truly are. But if you shift your focus to the land in the foreground and gently squint, you'll notice that the contrast in the clouds is far more delicate than it first appeared. So, capturing this nuance will lend your clouds a more believable and natural presence. You may be thinking, the cloud in the foreground seems pretty dark. Well, that cloud is still in shadow. There's an exception to every rule. When the sun is rising, the tops of the clouds are the first to be hit by the sun. And as you can see, the top to like the mid height of the clouds is being hit, and then everything below that's still in shadow. The sea, the ground, it's all in shadow. So when I'm referring to this rule, it really applies to the mid part of the clouds upwards. But the cloud in the foreground is actually pretty small and lower down than the clouds in the background. Because of this, it's still in shadow and a much darker value than the clouds in the background. And this is actually the perfect segue to my last and final tip. My last tip is about the perspective of clouds. As clouds recede into the distance, they appear closer to the horizon line, much like elements on land. While different cloud types can break this rule, it's a helpful guideline for most skies. You'll also notice that the distant clouds tend to group more closely together, and your mark making should become more horizontal and compressed to reflect the depth. Observing and applying these shifts in perspective will give your sky a greater sense of space and realism. In Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting, he says that all lines converge towards the horizon, even those of the sky. Those of the sky converge in a general way downward, while those of the ground in a general way upward. And this is just an excerpt out of the perspective chapter in his book. He's got a whole chapter on clouds alone. So if you're looking for more information regarding painting clouds, I highly recommend it. As you can see, the new Carte Mixed Media takes alcohol washes wonderfully, the pastel layered on just as it normally would over top. And hopefully you learned a thing or two about how to paint some clouds. If you want to see the full painting process, you can go to my Patreon. I've got the full real-time demo there where I walk through all of the decisions that I make and issues I run into, how to resolve them, that sort of thing. So the link to my Patreon's in the description, and I hope you enjoyed it or learned something new. All right, see you later.